We're live and you have audio.
Okay, let's stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And as a way of respecting, honoring, and creating awareness about our past, we begin our village board meetings by acknowledging that New Paltz is on the ancestral land of the Muncie, Esopus, and Lenape people. Let's check out our agendas and minutes and help us add to our list of actions to back up this acknowledgement.
Additions to the agendas for the consent agenda, we're going to add 4G. It's related to our Google Workspace renewal. And in the business agenda, we're adding item 4. It's related to the MOU with our CCA administrator. We had a call about that today. And item number 9, we are adding, it's a resolution in opposition to the discharge of contaminated water into the Hudson River. Item number 10 has to do with our draft MS4 annual report. And that's all I have as far as changes to the consent and business agendas. I move that we accept them.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And while we're at it, I only want to move items 1 through 3 of the consent agenda, because we'll just talk about some of the other things on the consent agenda.
Okay, second.
All in favor?
Aye. Oh, so should we motion to take like 4 onward out, or I guess you just said the same thing. Never
Yeah.
mind.
I think it's okay that way.
Sorry.
So,
Bill.
announcements. We have a meeting date change for the ZBA. They'll meet on March 28th at 7 p.m. The Millbrook Preserve Spring Festival will take place on April 15th from 2 to 4. And we have our county legislator, Eve Walter, with us. So we're going to hand the mic to
Thanks, Mike.
Eve to provide us with a county legislator update.
Hi, everybody. So I want to thank Alex for coming yesterday to the legislative session and staying till 10 o'clock at night. She was one of the few hanger-oners on a very, very long meeting. So what are some big things? One is related to the Puff Puff vape shop. There was a concern from a constituent of its location near middle school that was not being responded to. Mayor directed it to me. In my original follow-up, they identified that they had checked out the place and that it did not breach county law because it didn't sell tobacco products. But then I said, that's county law. What about state law? The Board of Health has to do state law, and that state law states that if it's near a school, it can't display tobacco use products, paraphernalia. It can't be on display in the front window, advertisement, or just there. So they went back and did talk to the owner, who was very receptive and agreed to make sure that there was nothing on display in the window. And the Board of Health will be going back. I don't know if they said a week or a month to check and confirm that that is true. And if not, they will issue a citation.
Right. So thanks a lot for following up, because the constituent, I guess, was not getting a response from staff at the county. So it's great that you took that upon yourself to do some nudging, which we all have to do in our various jobs. But yeah, my understanding was that the county law has to do with X number of feet from a school. And I think the school issue was not so much the middle school, but Mountain Laurel.
Right. Oh, sorry, not middle school. I keep saying middle school when I mean Mountain Laurel. So the county law is about sale of tobacco products, of tobacco. And so what happened was the Board of Health went there and they said, oh, there's no tobacco being sold here. You're fine. And I don't know why it didn't occur to them to not check state law too, since that's their responsibility.
Right.
And so the state law says that from a school, you can't have the paraphernalia in the window or advertisements for it.
And I looked at the definition in the county law. I thought it was also interesting that they do list several examples of tobacco and tobacco related products, including vape cartridges. So
Right.
if they were selling vape cartridges,
Yeah.
that would be a problem.
It seems like they're not selling anything like that. It's all just the paraphernalia.
Right, okay.
And there's also this fine line of what is advertising. Does it have to be a poster or is having it in the window advertising it? So, you know, I think the attorneys at the county understand our concerns and that, you know, as broad as the definition is, the whole point is that it's not promoted in any way in the window near the school.
Yeah. I think it's very challenging in our role as local electeds. Like oftentimes we come up with laws that are trickier to enforce. You know, it's kind of one of the main things that I have whenever I think about a law or a policy we come up with our building department. Like, are we setting our building department officials up for success? Like, is that something that they could even enforce, even if it's a very well-intentioned law? So in this situation, it probably was a little trickier and it took some extra effort to make sure that
That's
getting
generous of you. I mean, I think that the state law, I found it, I Googled it in 5 seconds and knew that that was the state law. So, but it was at least they went and they're taking care of it. And, you know, at first it was a little, they had tried and the store was closed. They weren't reaching the person, but when they reached the owner was very understanding.
got it. Okay.
Just a point on what you were saying, though, you kind of are right about the trickiness of enforcement and whatnot with the meaning of advertisement, because that's something that a locality could have a tighter definition of, like with regard to, like, you see a lot of local codes, sign laws, and they have definitions of like what advertising means. So I think that's why it's so vague on the state level, because that's our right. It's my take. at least.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. We're allowed to have laws that are more strict than the state
Yeah,
laws.
like we could, for example, ban, sorry to derail this, but just want to make sure we close that loop. Like we could ban advertisement that is also signage that uses electricity, for example, you know, or fossil fuels or something like that, or, you know, that causes light pollution and stuff. So there's got to be room for municipalities to have that ability.
Speaking of light pollution, it seems like there is some it may not be the perfect solution for the people on Plains Road, but from my understanding on emails, they seem to be okay with the proposals of a very low level light on just a single flagpole. I know that Dennis spoke to them. I haven't heard anything. I don't know if you've heard any more things.
Yeah. I can't remember
I got it.
who was in attendance at that second meeting.
Mhm.
But I felt like the residents of Plains Road felt heard,
Yes,
and they
exactly.
felt that Dennis and I'm drawing a blank on his name, the individual who runs the
Yes.
County Department of Veterans Affairs,
Thank
Mark
you.
Hazapoli. The residents felt heard and they came up with a solution. And I thought what was also interesting about that conversation is the light fixture that they researched for this county veterans cemetery is going to be used by the neighboring cemetery. They were going to do the same thing with their light fixtures,
Right.
update them from how they're currently illuminating the
Which they
flag.
need to, because when they went to look, the lights were out. We were gonna go do a little field trip and see what the light looked like, and it wasn't working.
But I thought it was a cool example of how, like, this entire process probably made something else better.
right.
Just because, this conversation was.
I believe
taking
they're
place.
solar powered lights, which is nice.
Yeah, it goes up high on top of the fixture. So then the foot candle for the light is directed down and it hits the flag immediately as opposed to coming up
Right.
from the ground.
And then they remove the lights from the other flagpoles.
Yes, and thanks again for getting involved and kind of shepherding that conversation.
Yeah, let's see. Also, speaking of how you define things, so we just passed a somewhat contentious resolution that now bans anyone holding a town or village elected position from being appointed into certain key roles in the county government, including deputy executive, I think assistant deputy executive, board of elections. There's a few. And the reason why my big concern was the title itself was basically like no elected officials, no appointed positions can be held by any elected official, and which means, just that clarity that you can have an appointment and serve on a school board, you can be on a fire board. It really, the concern was someone who had a position that would be related to money distribution to a municipality sitting in that municipality seat, which we did have an example of.
What was the example?
It was called the Dan Torres law when they first tried to do this, and it didn't pass the first time. And I think the reason is because to make a law about one human being is not logical. I think that it wasn't so much that people didn't respect the reasoning behind not wanting someone who has a position of power related to money also serving in a municipality. That does feel unfair. But it just has to be carefully written because not every appointed position has a position of power with money. I mean, whether it's true that would it be that bad? I don't necessarily see how it necessarily, but the point is, so those are there. We had some back and forth from it basically being very broad to us making it specific. So when in doubt, read the resolution. But I guess none of you can be appointed right now to a county.
Would the conversation, did it also include, it almost seems like you could draw a line of distinction if you have one position that involves a salary and another position that involves a salary. Right? Because you get a salary as a town council person.
Yeah,
and you get a salary, it almost seems like that could be the barrier.
Right. Although there are disclosure laws, so you do have to say what other income you make. And I'm sure if you serve on the village, you probably have to do disclosure law. Do you have to fill out disclosures of all the income you make? No.
We do have an ethics law. We've been encouraging our ethics committee to collect that information.
Because we have to fill it out every year. We have to disclose. So that, I think that's where they handle that. I don't think it comes up because anyone's going to be making some crazy amount of money doing multiple things. I think it becomes more of persuading county funds to your particular municipality.
Right.
Was more of the concern.
So you could serve on the school board and work for the county.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why I feel like it could be tied to whether a job includes monetary compensation.
Right. Well, I don't know. Do town boards and village boards, do you get compensated?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Trustees and council people,
Right.
all, it's a stipend, it's in our budget. I think our proposal includes $8,000 for village trustees.
Right.
9,000 for deputy mayor.
Wow. You guys are almost the same as we make.
Right. But that's material money relative to what you earn on the planning board or the shade tree commission, which is
nothing. Right.
Yeah.
I've been there too. Yeah. So that's there. But I think it's important to know that it doesn't apply. The other thing that's interesting that I hadn't really thought of is this idea of, is it is it clear, and I have to go look, that it's Ulster County? Like, what if you're appointed and you serve on a town board in Dutchess County? Does that matter then? Because you're obviously not dedicating money to your municipality from Ulster to Dutchess.
I'm
So,
thinking of that one example.
Yeah.
Duchess colleague,
Yeah.
fellow skate park aficionado,
Yeah.
who has a great
well,
job for our
so
county.
the important thing to know is that anyone who's currently holding a position is not included. They're grandfathered into the pre-law. Okay, let me keep going because you guys gotta want to go. We approved a resolution to request the state increase the Ulster County occupancy tax from 2% to 4%. They obviously have to agree to it or not, but we have put in that request.
So how does that compare to other counties?
It's still less. Yes, we have close counties at 5%, at 6%. So we are definitely.
And then what's the plan for the money? Is there a particular plan?
So there is a hope that this gets dedicated related to, there's been a few things both bantered about. One is directly to a housing fund. They definitely took out, there used to be a minimum that had to go to tourism. They've changed that. Not to say they want to totally defund tourism, but that was pretty restrictive. And there has been some suggestion of utilizing it as incentives to municipalities to put more controls on short-term rentals. But, first the state has to agree, then we have to pass another resolution actually doing it. And then I'm sure at that point, the conversation about what to do with it will happen.
Thank you. So then one thing that came up, and then I got so confused and lost and I didn't get a chance to research it yet. All-inclusive resorts versus just regular old hotels. How are those different?
Because it's the occupancy part of it. So it's the elements that you're taxing on.
Okay.
So it's not automatically, because if you had a hotel and you had a restaurant, they're separate. So just the fact that you include the food cost in the one cost doesn't make it fair that you're actually getting an occupancy tax on food. So it really only relates to occupancy part of it. And so if you're an all-inclusive and it's like with this, you get horseback riding, you get this, get that, those other elements are not going to be subject to it.
Thank you. That's so clear.
And then the last two are just, we started talking about this yesterday, but I don't understand why contracts are taking so long to happen. Have you gotten your water?
We got a call this week and they asked us for some details.
Okay,
so I'm
it
feeling
feels like they're doing one municipality a month, which it's going to
Has
take
anyone gotten?
2 years.
Has
Yes,
anyone?
we've approved one or two. I think we've approved two so far, but it feels very slow, which tied into that is the fact that we were shocked to find out that the contract for the legal services for eviction services hadn't even gone through yet. It finally is in this process. I'm not sure if they said that no one told them to go, which is crazy. So they got to go a couple of months ago, but it just, I don't understand why these things take so long, but they clearly are. I don't know if we need to put more people in contracts. So those two are happening. I did ask last night for an update, but I didn't get one yet today. So as soon as I get an update on that, so you could actually tell people to go.
Yeah, I think I bought that one tenant sometime. So we'll figure it out.
And I think that's it, unless there's any questions. Oh. Yes, Bill?
Hi, Eve. Thanks for the update. With the occupancy tax at 4%, what other counties nearby have 5 to 6?
Say that before. Say it again.
Who has 5 to 6?
Nearby have 5 to 6.
I don't have the list in front of me, but I had once seen the whole list. I believe I'm pretty sure Dutchess. I'm pretty sure almost everyone is higher than us. I don't think there's that many that have it as low as we do.
Sure. And why was it settled on 4?
I think it was a compromise. It's very hard. Ulster County has a lot of people, a lot of hotels and resorts, and understandably, those people were concerned about the implications it might have on them, on whether that would result in them losing customers. And so I think, there was definitely people who wanted to go to 6, but I think it was a difficult. It's already challenging enough to go from 2 to 4 without, and it's post-COVID, and we know that many of them they lost customers during that time. So I think 4 just felt like, a baby step that would bring in a considerable amount of money, that 2% extra for us, as a group. It's not going to affect people much. I mean, if it's $500 a night, that's $10. But I think it was just concern about really stressing out the hotels and motels.
Thank you.
Anything else?
I saw, it was in the news about the grant award that the money originally came from the federal government to support the ADU program. No, not ARPA. The program to help the county, and I guess they're partnering with RUPCO to administer 1.75 million to qualifying individuals who construct ADUs.
Yeah.
Because the press release from Kingston made it seem like it was only for the city of Kingston. And because I had discussed this with Dennis Doyle several months ago, that's why I was like scratching my head, and then I triple checked and called him, and he was like, no, this is for the entire county.
Right. There was,
and then the applications will be due this summer.
Right. And they might have gotten conflated with, there was some funding RUBCO got specifically to add elements of energy efficiency elements. So I don't know if those things all got combined, but you do remind me that there is a resolution similar to it hasn't made it out of committee yet, but similar to the water match of a solar match for municipalities. So I don't know whether it'll make it out of committee, but if you just
ARPA?
Yeah, we still have a little more to spend. But that actually reminds me. And Paradise Lane so far the price tag has gone up already by $10 million. I remain very, very concerned. I do expect that it's going to go up even more. I think my concern is when you're not doing well, like when COVID first started happening and we were really worried about money coming in and people being protected, you're very careful and protective of I'm sure with you and your budget, you just are very thoughtful about those things. We got so flush, which is the whole country, which is why we're facing a recession, is so much money came in that I fear that different projects, people are just not be given a budget, but more what feels like a blank check. I mean, I've already expressed that was my sense with the veteran cemetery. There wasn't you can't spend more than, and the price went from $250,000 to almost $3 million. So I just caution us all that we do have a bunch of money in the county right now, but it's not going to always be this way. And I feel like anything we do spend it on needs to have that really build us up for the future. And I do worry about the increased price and the fact that 911 center is going to become even more and more expensive.
And you and I have spoken about the 911 center and that property in general and whether it would need water and sewer. And I got to have a conversation with Dennis Doyle this week where he explained to me they would have enough water on site just based on how much water they anticipate using. However, because of the fire suppression equipment, they would need, or they may be able to use the well water on site,
They'd have to dig another well.
or, right, or they would look to connect to our municipal system, which I don't foresee would be a challenge because there is an 8-inch main that goes under the thruway and serves the toll booth plaza
As long
property.
as $1 million isn't a challenge.
Right, it will cost something to connect. I mean, and that's what they will compare, is how much will it cost to connect to the municipal system versus having your own water and then your own fire suppression equipment on site. So they're going to compare those two numbers. But if they come to the village and look for an extension of Town Water District 3 through the town board, because that's the way it works, they would have to petition the town board, and the town board asks the village for a connection. I couldn't imagine that our board would have an issue with it, with extending that small amount of water. Our challenge for some time has been how much sewer capacity we have at the Huguenot Street wastewater treatment plant, and that's not being discussed whatsoever.
I mean, you're right, and that I think the point wasn't so much whether the water could flow, but how much it was really going to cost. They've estimated at $370,000, which seems not possible given the cost of the renovations here and in Ellenville. So that's a big concern, is if they're estimating 350, the accuracy. But, it's an interesting point because I had to battle a lot of myths that were going around that this property could then be reused for housing. And the fact that I hadn't even thought of bringing up the sewer, like that would have ended that conversation so much quicker, because that just wouldn't be feasible. You couldn't put up a whole housing development, I would assume. I mean,
Well,
without building its own private septic system. I mean, it couldn't connect to the village.
Right. So the conversation that we've had for years and years and years is that I think it would make sense for our community to, if someone waved a magic wand and Town Sewer District 6 was able to, instead of discharging its effluent into some wetlands up near North Ohioville, instead it connected to the sewer plant down on Huguenot Street, that would be up to 15,000 gallons per day, which, seems perfectly fine. And it makes a lot of sense, and that it would be very helpful for Town Sewer District 6. And then in the last 8 years, we have also had conversations with the town and Steve Turk when he owned the formerly known as the Plesser property, to provide 35,000 gallons per day. So that'd be a total of 50 Sewer District 6. And then they were calling the new GOC property Sewer District 7. That's when Steve Turk still owned it. So I think we have memorialized that we could extend a 35,000 gallons per day to that property. And then you can pencil out how many housing units would that be. You could build some sort of housing complex there. That would be fairly significant, but I think it goes back to the question that we're all wondering about, like, what developer would want to build something that would cost X, and then it would be X plus, because you would also have to pay for the connection to get that 35,000 gallons per
That's
day.
interesting. I mean, I thought you had given me the message that the sewer was not feasible.
No, the sewer, well,
A connection.
the sewer is not feasible greater than 35,000 gallons per day. That's what we have, years of emails, years of board conversations. So I think it would feel awkward to not continue to offer that, but it's not a gigantic housing project.
Right, and it's not an issue. I mean, it's right now not being assessed for housing. It's not a housing, I mean, that's not a housing project. It was more of recognizing that
Dennis told me exactly that. He said that there's no discussion taking place whatsoever in terms of a housing project. I actually have notes on how many units that would be.
Yeah, I was gonna say, tell us how many units that would add up to? I'm just curious.
Have it somewhere.
It's also difficult to, there are so many other elements, like, because the EOC is taking the prime roadside space to it, but it doesn't matter. The fact is, anything could be done with, several $1 billion, anything. But
That's so much money.
it is so much money.
Right, but and what we've discussed as a board is, there's so much demand for our remaining sewer capacity at the plant for these apartment complexes that are being considered in the village,
Right.
which makes sense. Like, you want to house people where people want to live near other
Are you able
amenities.
to extend the water and sewer down 32, up 32, north 32?
Yep, it's all being discussed. It will require investments from those developers, but again, it's like, you have a force main, you can connect to the nearby sewer pump station that will need to be upgraded to handle a larger apartment complex. But that's very different and less expensive than creating new infrastructure, which involves new sprawl, which I think flies in the face of any sort of like New York State environmental law and smart growth principles. Like, you generally want to build where you already have density, where you already have infrastructure, instead of creating more stuff that we then have to look at 100 years into the future and say, wow, we should have probably replaced that sooner.
Make it so people can walk to the things they need, bike to what they need, etc. And yeah, my take is like, if that housing idea ever does come up down the road, like, it's going to be different numbers, like in terms of capacity then. So anyway.
Yeah. I just realized as I was coming here, I did not follow up on the bus loop. I will do that
Thank
and
you.
find out that. So that and the eviction one, I will follow up on. I mean, it sounded all positive with the bus loop. With the school still contributing, but I will confirm.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yep. Anything else? You can go on with your meeting, or shall I keep you here till 10 o'clock tonight?
So any feedback yet on like my suggested edit to the local law on affordable? What, you guys didn't stay up until 3 a.m. discussing everything that the comments said?
No.
Because like it looked like this version, it seemed like it was updated from the one that I had seen previously, and this part was in there that I feel like it was just like a grammar thing.
Right.
almost.
I imagine the sponsors will be pretty open to it, and it doesn't substantially change it, so it doesn't change the public hearing issues.
Okay, cool. I'll follow up with the sponsors. Thank you for that.
Yeah. And speaking of public hearings, maybe I'll wait till yours are done. Or your
Okay.
public comment.
I have some announcements.
Oh yeah, take it away.
So next Tuesday, March 28th, 7:30 p.m. is Tenants Rights 101 with Legal Services of the Hudson Valley, New York Public Interest Research Group. Thanks to student government as well, because we will be on campus in Student Union Building sub 100N. If you cannot make it, but you have questions for our lawyers that will be coming from Legal Services of the Hudson Valley, send them my way. Or if you will be coming and you're uncomfortable asking the questions, send them my way too, and I'll ask them anonymously. I do want to also remind everyone, you can get your Narcan, harm reduction services, like snort kits, test kits, all that kind of stuff by texting ERH Rescue to 2100. Thanks to Terrence for putting that in the paper as well last week. Never use alone hotline. Use it. It's a good one. Save it. 800-484-3731. Free food fridge is right outside 25 Paddock Hill Avenue all the time. Don't go hungry. Go get some food if you need it. If you can donate food, that's great too. Just make sure you follow the do's and don'ts over at millionsofbutterflies.org/free-food-fridge. And then I wanted to, this is a sad update, but since I had been updating the community about our friend Jordan Taylor's disappearance, I just want to let everyone know that he passed. and New Paltz loves him. And then one more announcement is, so drag queens are under attack all over the country. So in the opposite realm in New Paltz, I just want to take a second to uplift our local drag scene. And so on April 1st at Snugs, Viola Peculiar is putting on her performance called Eviction, based on real experiences right here in the community. And I'm really excited to see this. I wasn't able to see her first performance of it that she did up in Catskill. And I'm really glad that she's able to do it right here where we can all just walk down to Snugs on April 1st. Her flyers all over social media. So let's go and support our local drag queens.
Thanks, Alex. I had a couple of announcements too. Family of New Paltz is always looking for donations. They take food, in-season clothing, and financial donations too. That helps folks in our community pay bills. And so if you have any extra funds, be it $10 or more, of course, bring it down to family during their open hours. Also, I mentioned this last time too, but I'm not running for village board again. So there is a question mark on perhaps who would step up, or different folks who may step up to run for village board. Eve, you're vacating and you are a village resident, so I just wanted to put that on your radar. But yeah, and I also wanted to just offer myself, if anybody had any questions, if anybody, a village resident had questions about running or what the job entails, I'm happy to speak with them, and they can email me at mzip@villageofnewpaltz.org.
Thanks, Michelle.
You still have me all year, so.
Goodness.
But yeah, so.
Okay, then, do we have any, what's that? Do we have any public comment? No, is Mark here for? Are we doing anything with Mark Blauer tonight?
This is to approve his contract, to submit the 2020, the next CDBG grant cycle that is expected to start in July.
Was it the last meeting when we had a public hearing for the application? Okay, that's what I was thinking, sorry. Next item, I motion that we open the public hearing for the proposed law to amend village code to authorize the village to issue licenses for the collection of solid waste and recyclable materials within the village. So this is basically another public hearing for the law that involves the single hauler that we have had for the last 5 years. That contract will conclude later this spring. So, as we discussed at our last meeting, we're starting the process of having haulers bid again to be the single hauler for the village, and ideally for the town and the village. The anticipation is that the town and the village are doing this process in parallel.
I'll second opening that.
And do we have any comments? Is anyone here?
I just need to know if I have to change the day that I put my garbage out.
And that's to be determined based on who bids on the
Yep.
bids on the project.
I have a question. So that the town, are we in communication with the town?
Yeah,
during this
100%.
process?
Yeah,
And-
Our attorney and Autumn has been communicating with everyone at the town. Yeah, it'll, our understanding is that it'll all take place, just not at the same meetings.
Right. Yeah, I wasn't here when it passed
Yeah.
the first time, so I was curious how that worked.
So if it's a different vendor, then all of our bins will be collected, I assume,
Potentially.
and you would have all new bins. Wonder what they do with those.
That's a good question. That's a good public comment right there.
Publicly commenting. Where will they put the bin?
Right. So, I mean, to bounce off what Michelle just said, I just remember because I was the scribe during the process last time around, and it was always at joint meetings, and I got to witness public comments that were made like to the both entities, to both governments, you know what I mean? And so it never fails, and they were all kind of in one spot. Can we make sure any town, like any comments the town gets, you know, on their version of the local law amendment and stuff, like come our way too somehow?
Yes,
Like, I know they wind up in the same package, but I don't know, it's just different how it's being done this time, but if we could just make sure we get those and include them, that would be helpful to hear what town people are hearing from the public. And vice versa, you know?
Yeah, it's a good point. That would be.
Thank
useful.
you.
I'm gonna excuse myself.
Thank you. Eve.
Thank you.
Anita,
Very glad that you filled us in. Okay, so I think we should continue to keep that public hearing open. So the next item is a public hearing for the tentative budget for the village for fiscal year starting June 1 through May 31, 2024. I move we open the public hearing.
Hi.
Oh, I guess we have to do all in favor that we opened it? I don't think so. Do we have any comments yet? So to keep it open?
Yeah.
Oh, we can keep it open a couple meetings, so
Okay.
definitely keep it open through the next meeting, which is not for a while, right? Because
Cool. Yeah, it's always so interesting how like our fiscal, you know, year kind of works with the state budget process too, you know, because
mhm,
when we have to close up our public hearing on our budget, like the state will have already passed like the state budget for, you know, their version of the fiscal year. And we can kind of see like what things look like and whatnot and make changes if we have to. So I think that's cool. All right, we'll keep that open.
okay, then let's. Sorry, I'm just trying to take down some other numbers that I think are fun. Okay, so let's continue into what we had in the consent agenda. The reason that I wanted to move item number 4 on its own was for a few different reasons, but 4B has to do with the water main replacement from the pump station up the hill closer to Mountain Rest Road, and then that continues down into the Morning Star neighborhood. And I'm pleased to report the contractors at Merit Construction have done a great job, and our DPW is very happy with the quality of their work. So that involved keeping the old 8-inch main in the ground and then putting in a new 12-inch main right next to it. There were a few properties along the way that were connected, so they were reconnected. And then for every property that was along its path, they received a tap so that if they ever wanted to connect to municipal water, and I know that one of the properties straight away is going to not use their well anymore, but connect to the municipal system. So that's in the town outside the village, even though this is a village water main. And this is it's been a very interesting project because this water main, that there are only 2 water mains that serve the entire community. That's the village, the school district, SUNY New Paltz, and all the town water districts. So there are 2 mains. And then all along the way, it serves town properties. So this is an actual sample of the water main that was removed, and this is from closer to the pump station, so further up the hill, and you can see all the tuberculated material inside. So this is an 8-inch main. So in reality, it's probably a 6-inch main. So one of the advantages, and we described the same thing when we replaced the main on Prospect Street, when you remove a main that has this much tuberculated material in it with a new main, the another advantage, in addition to not having the risk of as much brown water when the pipes get jostled, is that your fire flows are stronger. So if there was ever an incident where those water mains had to be pulled on very hard, you're in a situation where you're protecting those properties because the water mains have been updated. And the project also involved getting temporary easements from a handful of properties along the way. And then some of the properties, like in the Morningstar neighborhood, the easements had been updated when those houses were constructed, because those easements were originally 10 feet wide. And when those houses were constructed about 20 years ago, they were 20 feet wide. So there was no need to get a temporary easement. But then there were some other properties that needed, that we engaged in a temporary easement. So instead of just the 10-foot wide path, which our contractors could have gone in, and I guess that's what they did, over 100 years ago, they dug things by hand as opposed to using equipment. So technically the main could have been replaced by hand, but it was very helpful for the neighbors to allow the contractors to come in. And I think moving forward, the other thing that needs to be done is that our plan for our public works department is to not allow that corridor to just grow in with trees. If you're spending millions of dollars updating important infrastructure, you need to have access to it, and it needs to be easily accessible. So that is not going to be a regularly maintained path, but at a minimum, we're just going to have our public works make sure that that path is cleared at least annually. And we're also going to put signs up and a split rail fence, because we also don't want the easement area to be used as a path, because that's not what it will be. That's not its intention at all. And then I included this other piece of material that was connected to the original main, because I thought it was just like really wild looking. It almost looks like a very heavy bicycle fork, but these are lead pipes. So, that's another enormous advantage in terms of why we do what we do and try to remove potentially problematic old pipes that are made from lead from our water system. So there's a lot of benefits, and we're very pleased that project went as smoothly as it did, and we're appreciative that it all got done, because without water, we would probably have to, move to either Gardner or Rosendale.
So this is probably how many years old though?
So there's a water group on Facebook, which is all guys who and men and women who work in that field. And so I put this picture up on that group, and I asked them, because there's actually some ball valves here. So I've tried to get a sense, and they were all guessing 1920s. We're thinking at least 1920s, because we know when that line was put in. So, this is all north of 100 years old. These museum items sitting on our table.
Thanks for bringing in these items. for us
Yeah.
to see.
Yeah, and they're all for sale. No, they're priceless. Just kidding. We can't sell these. And then the firehouse project. So we have a payable to Green Mountain for $95,376.93. I also just pulled that out of the consent agenda because I wanted to give our staff a shout out, because that's been a very challenging process. There's a lot of I's that have to be dotted to make sure that we are receiving all the grant money that that we would be eligible for. And there was a check that we recently received for nearly $500,000. And I know that we were able to secure that remaining grant money from the Governor's Office of Storm Recovery because the village staff were so diligent and careful about making sure that all of that was being processed correctly through the complicated software reimbursement system. And, wild stuff goes on in this office on a daily basis. And it does not happen unless you have dedicated staff who, want to make sure that no stone gets left unturned, because otherwise you could leave important grant money on the table. So with that, and so I think this is another interesting example of, what we're trying to do in terms of being very careful with, how we budget for things. So you'll see that we're purchasing a new muffin monster, and it sounds really fun, but it's basically just mechanicals down at the sewer plant. And then we're also going to purchase a roller, and we're going to pay for these items out of the sewer fund. We need, the sewer fund has additional money that it makes sense to spend that money this year, as opposed to hunting and having it coming out of a future budget. So, this is just part of how we try to be nimble and use any remaining money on the table, as opposed to budgeting it in a different year. So I'd like to go ahead and motion to approve items 4 through 9 on this consent agenda.
Okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
Business agenda. Does anyone want to comment on climate equity, social justice?
Yeah, I think we'll get to that, but
Perfect.
a lot of these agenda items.
Yeah, absolutely. Item number 2. So this is somewhat related, but this is more about an existing award where we're authorizing the mayor's office to sign an agreement for the preparation of the small cities block grant between the village and our grant writer, Mark Blauer. Actually, that's not an existing award. That would be to apply for this upcoming CFA, which would be this summer. So does someone want to second my motion? All in favor? And then the next item is a motion to declare April 22nd of this year as Arbor Day in the village of New Paltz.
Second.
Any further discussion? No.
April 22nd is also Earth Day on Huguenot Street. So keep an eye out for tons of ways to celebrate Arbor Day and Earth Day on that day.
Okay. Did we pass it? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. The next item, this is what we added to the agenda tonight because we had a call. The CCA administrator that we work with, Jewel, received 3 different bids from energy supply companies to provide energy generation to our customers, and by law that would include our residents in the village of New Paltz. So we got 3 different bids, and we wanted to agree via an MOU that we would like to choose the fixed 100% renewable energy rate, and then as they sharpen details regarding the bids, it will be determined whether we're going to engage in a 12, 24, or 36 month. But what the CCA administrator needed from us via MOU was just a commitment that we would choose the the fixed 100% renewable energy offering from the ESCOs that responded to their RFP. So would someone like to second my motion?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And then the Millbrook Preserve Bridge project. So we are awaiting updated details in terms of what the plan will look like in terms of bridge design. I think we provided an update at the very last meeting where, one of the things that we did, which we hope will involve more contractors bidding, is making sure that the path was really clear in terms of how they will get their equipment down to build this water crossing closer to North Manheim, just inside the Millbrook Preserve, and then also just some other tweaks to that design. I actually have a call into Ed Pine. He's the engineer at the county. I think Bill was talking about this at the last meeting, just because the county had actually contributed steel from a former county bridge that will be used for this bridge. So what we're trying to do is just see if we could find out which bridge, because that would be kind of fun to know, like, oh, was that a bridge in Ellenville and now it's in the Millbrook Preserve?
Mhm.
So we're going to get an answer to that question, I hope.
Thank you for that. Yeah.
And then the next item, so this was discussed at our last meeting. We received a response from town staff, and it was a very helpful response in that. So the way the capital improvements had been paid for last year, they were paid for out of the townwide A fund, and then the plan would be they invoice the village per the agreement from 2014, where the village and the town share capital improvements 50-50. So in this case, it works out to $7,143. So then they would reimburse the A fund and have that funding come out of the town outside the village B fund, and then with our contribution from the village's general fund. And then what I think we should also get, Autumn, is just a paper trail, just saying, we just want an understanding in terms of, like, was just over $7,000 in 2022. Was that a typical year in terms of capital improvements? Or, how do we budget for that in the future? And also, if we're going to follow the agreement from 2014, the capital improvements are supposed to be discussed and improved by both boards. It should not be a situation where we're getting an invoice after the fact, because, as we discussed at our last meeting, there could be opportunities, like I think the playground mulch was an example, because we use playground mulch in Hasbrook Park as well as Moriel Pool Park. Like, are those things being done together? Because that might be an opportunity to work collaboratively. And I know that the town highway department and the village DPW already do that, on a regular basis, best they can. But we just want to make sure that is clearly the goal. So we can send another note to the town and just asking them that. Now I'm gonna. Oh, so we probably actually have to motion to make this payment, right? So that's my motion.
Second.
Michelle seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And then Alex was going to provide us with some highlights from the proposed state budget.
First, I wanted to hear about the thing you went to with the governor about the housing compact. That's, I think, one of the biggest things there, or if not, that's fine. But yeah, so basically, so far the state, like the Assembly and the Senate, have now come out with their one house budget resolutions, which is basically each chamber's response to the governor's proposed budget that she presented, I guess, a month and a half ago. And it's really cool seeing how this year, the Assembly and the Senate, like their one house resolutions, like aren't like crazy different, you know, like they're pretty in unison, which is really cool. And they represent like, you know, granted these resolutions, it's not like the budget resolutions that they're working on right now that have the nitty gritty line items and stuff, right? But it's basically their response to the governor's proposal with a wish list of like kind of the goals that they hope to achieve in the budget. And, you know, funding SUNY comes up in it, you know, but for me, I think one of the biggest things I really like, and I think our community will be excited to hear about, is like the housing stuff they included. You know, not only kind of being like, okay, Governor Hochul's housing compact, like let's do all that, but let's do a little bit more. So they included also in the resolution, both houses, language for passing statewide good cause eviction, which is really exciting. You know, when that language is like brought up in kind of this wish list, it makes it so much easier for them to kind of actually then debate it out as a piece of legislation during this whole process while they're in session these next few months. Other things that were Village and New Paltz things. So because it's not like the actual nitty gritty stuff, I don't see any SUNY impact aid or anything like shouted out like that.
Is there a possibility that our representatives would push to include that before the budget is finalized?
I don't know, we could ask
Okay.
again. Yeah. So I know you went to, like, with mayors and supervisors, the Hochul Housing Compact event.
I went to an event down in Westchester
Yeah.
when they announced the DRI and New York Forward
Oh, okay,
awardees,
that's what that
and
is.
there was some. I feel like at every turn there's always a discussion of the housing compact. So it was discussed there, and
It's everywhere, yeah.
there was reference to funding for water and sewer to make, you know, because that's what we've been pounding the table about for years. You know, I feel like there have been housing units added in this village, which would meet these targets. But you know, we've also done other things which I think speak to the goals in terms of having an ADU law and changing zoning to require mixed use multi-story. We just need to make sure that there's support from the state that we can update the existing infrastructure to then support this density. You know, the number that was discussed, I fear is too low, because
Agreed.
I know how much things cost. Like, we recently attended a meeting with the DEC because, you know, this has been a conversation that many of us who have served in New Paltz and have expressed concern about, like, if we do 800 to 900,000 gallons per day when SUNY is here, and we've done more than that before we made a lot of improvements to the inflow and infiltration, and then our permitted DEC daily volume caps out at 1.5 million gallons per day. What happens when, you know, these next 5 to 10 apartment complexes get constructed over the next 5 to 10 years? What do we do as far as a community? Like, how would we be able to absorb any new housing once we're bumping up against our 1.5 million gallons per day number? And the DEC told me to chat with the town supervisor from New Windsor, George Meyer. So I called George up, and he explained to me how they were doing 5 million gallons per day at their sewer plant, and they went ahead and planned to increase the the size of that plant from 5 million per day to 8 million gallons per day, and it would cost $60 million. So, and that's always been my understanding, is that like the replacement value for our sewer plant was probably like at least $30 million, probably a lot more than that now, because capital projects have gone up. So, if we're talking about $250 million for water and sewer to reach housing goals, and the town of New Windsor is spending 60 million to add capacity, I don't see how $250 million moves the needle. Just replacing this stuff costs $1.8 million.
Yeah, well, I guess that's one reason I'm really glad to see that both the Assembly and Senate are in their budget negotiations and whatnot. They're looking at, taxing the super wealthy to, figure out how to balance these budgets more. And I'm really hoping that they're able to, sway the governor to do the right thing on that. Because we need to think about all that stuff for the future.
Yeah. So, I mean, the important thing, as you pointed out for us in the near term, is we need to contact the offices of our senator and assembly person tomorrow and see whether it is likely that our request for SUNY impact aid will make its way into the budget, because alternatively, we pay for these things locally. And so our next item on our village agenda is our tentative budget, which we're proposing a 0% tax increase in our general fund. And one of the things that we pay for out of our general fund is having a fire department. And what's very interesting about New Paltz is that our cost per call. So if you use last year's number, we did 716 calls. That's, as I point out, more than 2 calls per day. The budget this coming year will be $1.17 million. So it's a pretty significant number. If you were to divide 1.17 million by 716, that's how much it costs. And obviously different calls cost a whole lot more than some, like an actual structure fire that lasts hours versus a nuisance alarm. Those cost different amounts. But our budget in the village is a function of how many calls were in the village, the college, and mutual aid is shared between the town and the village. So a large percentage of what village taxpayers are paying for is how many calls are in the village or are on SUNY campus. Whereas the town, and historically it works out to be about 50-50. In the last 2 years, it's basically about 51% of the calls were in the village, including SUNY, and 49% were in the town outside the village. So what we do is so for this 1.17 million number for this coming year, the village will pay for 51% of that, and actually 51.6% of that, and the town will pay for the balance, which is less than 50%. But it's just interesting to think about how village taxpayers pay for the calls that are on campus, whereas in the town outside the village, they're paying for the calls in the town outside the village and the throughway, and then they share the mutual aid calls with us. And I guess that's another tricky thing too, is that the town of New Paltz is paying for the calls on the throughway. There's definitely fewer calls on the throughway compared to the SUNY campus, but that, that's another kind of like unfunded state mandate in a way.
Yeah.
But as we spoke about earlier, we have a public hearing on this agenda or that we opened, and we will keep opened at least through the next meeting. But did we have any other questions about the tentative budget? Well, I also did want to highlight, because Hudson Valley One got it wrong in terms of what we were discussing at our last meeting. So I think an important point to highlight is how, we had a 0% budget last year. We're proposing a 0% budget this year. And that occurred when municipalities were receiving a significant amount of money through American Rescue Plan aid. And we did not use any of our ARP money in the general fund. We used all of our ARP money in the water fund, which is siloed from the general fund. So we're talking about not a 0% tax increase that didn't receive the tailwind of ARP money. What we did discuss at our last meeting, which is where I think the newspaper Hudson Valley One was confused with.
Oh, it was Mid-Hudson.
Nope.
Oh, no.
Sorry.
HV1.
Okay.
Mid-Hudson got some other thing totally wrong. I'm not discussing that. I'm talking about Hudson Valley One's reporting on American Rescue Plan money. We are applying to Ulster County because Ulster County had received, I think, $33 million. And what they've been doing is they were using some money directly for county programs and projects. And then they have tried to figure out ways to share some of that money with the local municipality. So we applied for the water and sewer money, which was what Eve spoke about tonight. So we were awarded $500,000 from the county share of ARP money for a water project that will go towards the new water main on North Chestnut Street once we bid out that project, hopefully later this year. But the ARP money that Hudson Valley One was talking about in their most recent news article when we discussed it was we are applying to the county because the county is having a special opportunity where municipalities can apply for up to $100,000. And then we have to come up with some of our own local match that would go towards our parks. So we're going to apply for some of their ARP money to use that money at the basketball and pickleball courts down across the street from St. Joe. So that's been a project that's been dreamed about for years and years and years. We want to replace that retaining wall and that fencing that our DPW has done a great job of keeping in the best condition that they can, and then put in new surfacing. And so that would be a project that would be right next to the other piece that was in an original plan from 2015-16, which involved a green infrastructure feature on that southern portion of those ball courts, which we already did because we got money from our former state senator, now county exec, Jen Metzger. So
It's so complicated. I think you just did a good job explaining that, though. Thank you.
yes, so and then this is not to be confused with our skate park project, which we have gotten the ball rolling in terms of getting a design and hope to have an RFP for skate park builders to bid on in 2023. So that's it in terms of that item. I'm going to move on to our resolution where we're opposing the discharge of contaminated water into the Hudson River. Does someone want to take that?
So do you want me to just read it quickly? It's probably better than
Okay.
explain it. Sure. So this is about Indian Point and it's decommissioning. So whereas the company decommissioning Indian Point nuclear power plant announced its intention to release water from on-site radioactive fuel waste pools into the Hudson River, whereas to date, there's no specific reporting of the radionuclide content of this water, which is heavily contaminated from the storage of the nuclear fuel waste. And whereas pre-release filtration to remove these isotopes has been presented as a solution by the company to reduce the content of these carcinogenic contaminants to a level, quote, as low as reasonably achievable, end quote. Whereas the National Academy of Sciences has indicated that there is no verifiable safe level of these isotopes when they are ingested or inhaled, whereas such pre-release treatment would not remove tritium, also carcinogenic from the water, and whereas any contaminants in the Hudson present the risk of entering the food chain. Whereas there are community members who depend on fish from the river as a food source. Whereas in addition, there are 7 communities upriver from us who source their drinking water from the Hudson. And whereas since the river is an estuary that flows from south to north, as well as from north to south, this fact has to be considered. Whereas the river also serves as a source of recreational activities and represents an economic resource that will be endangered by this reckless action. And whereas if these discharges are allowed, great strides in conservation efforts and investments made in the last 50 years would put those efforts back decades while possibly erasing them. This work has resulted in the significant return of the bald eagle, an increase in osprey and blue heron, with sightings of dolphins, seals, otters becoming more frequent. The decline in some fish populations, such as striped bass and herring, may be leveling off, while other species such as shad and sturgeon are still at risk. In recent years, restoration projects are aiding the recovery of oyster populations for the ecological benefits they provide, and biomonitoring of macro invertebrate communities consisting of mayflies, stoneflies, and caddisflies has shown an ongoing increase in their population over the decades, indicative of cleaner waters. These and many other positive environmental developments would be imperiled. And now, therefore, be it resolved that the Village of New Paltz strongly opposes the plan to release over 1 million gallons of contaminated water from the from Indian Point Nuclear Power Plant site into the Hudson River. Be it further resolved that, our village clerk sends us off to all the usual suspects. And I motion that we pass this resolution.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thanks, Alex.
Thank you so much. Our environmental policy board members are excited that we're taking on this, and so our friends at Riverkeeper too. And I just want to thank Julie on the town board for carrying the same resolution on their end too.
Do you know, so I imagine that they would prefer to discharge this contaminated water into the river just because it's less expensive. So it's more expensive to do something that's environmentally responsible with the water. So what do they do with it?
So there's no clear answer on that. There's a bunch of different opportunities, that have been tossed around. There was a good Gothamist article that I circulated among our EPD and Climate Smart Task Force last night that kind of laid out, like you can truck it, you can store it, like there's all these different things. Typically, radioactive waste at power plants winds up being stored, on site forever, in certain ways. I think it's really interesting that this company that, kind of won the decommissioning bid, and it's all in their hands, because there really aren't any regulations right now, like saying you cannot release radioactive waste into any waterways in New York State, why would there be a law about that? Because it's never been a problem. Senator Hartcomb to the south of us actually is carrying a bill that he just introduced earlier this month that has an assembly same as that would make it illegal to do that, which would help us here. But this company thinks you could, it's charcoal that they want to use as the filtration system, by the way, like charcoal, like that's going to get rid of radioactive stuff. So I don't have an answer to like what the best thing to do would be. There's so many other options like this. There's no reason this should be what we do.
Right. It seems like, unfortunately, maybe the only option is just to store it indefinitely, right?
Yeah.
But what's not a reasonable solution is to dump it in the river.
Exactly. So yeah, I was saying last night, in email, Rachel Ladodka, and some other EPB peeps, this is an issue I got in on, as a high school kid when 9/11 happened, and I was like, oh my God, this environmental thing is so dangerous. And I can't believe I'm sitting here as a grown up, older than I ever thought I would be, saying we have to pass a resolution that has to do with Indian Point. That's bonkers to me. So thank you so much.
Okay, the next item is, we have a draft MS4 annual report. It will be posted on the village website for 30 days. We're announcing that for state requirements. And then I'm gonna hand it back over to Alex regarding the resolution regarding trans day of visibility.
Thanks. So I drafted up this resolution based on stuff that Congress and the US Senate, as well as the City of Philadelphia passed in past years, because it's, I think, important for us to declare March 31st, 2023 Transgender Day of Visibility. Whereas we celebrate the existence of transgender, non-binary, gender non-conforming, and gender diverse people, and we value their resilience, their vibrancy, and their ability to push society further towards inclusion for everyone, and denounce growing efforts to criminalize their existence and care and to limit their flourishing. And whereas International Transgender Day of Visibility takes place annually on March 31st to celebrate transgender, non-binary, gender non-conforming, and gender diverse people and raise awareness of discrimination and oppression faced by trans people worldwide. And whereas visibility alone is not enough. Until we have true justice and equity for transgender and non-binary people, visibility will always carry some risk and may not be possible for all. Still, far too many transgender and non-binary people, in particularly trans women of color, continue to face profound threats to their safety, well-being, and life. And whereas there is a growing and dangerous nationwide effort to not only reverse important civil rights for transgender and non-binary people, but to fundamentally attack and eradicate transgender youth and transgender lives. Hundreds of bills have been introduced in dozens of states to limit the rights of transgender and non-binary people, especially youth, including bills seeking to ban or criminalize gender-affirming healthcare and other life-saving supports. And whereas in the face of these hardships, transgender people continue to inspire their world, their very survival, as well as with their manifold achievements and their powerful spirit. And whereas the transgender community has made it clear they will not be erased, must be accorded all of the rights and opportunities made available to all. And whereas transgender, non-binary, gender non-conforming, and gender diverse people continue to bravely tell their stories and push for full equity under the law, whereas the ongoing civil rights struggle in our country has been strengthened and inspired by the leadership of the transgender community. And whereas trans people deserve joy and abundance, are worth defending, celebrating, and uplifting at all times, now therefore be it resolved that the Village of New Paltz Board of Trustees declares March 31st, 2023 as Trans Day of Visibility. Be it further resolved that we commend and encourage actions that support and celebrate trans, non-binary, and gender expansive people. We thank our partners at LT Memorial Library for agreeing to let us light up a tree in blue and pink to resemble the transgender flag in celebration of this day. Thank you, Michelle, for being the leader on that. And we fully support plans to illuminate pink and blue lights on the Mid-Hudson Bridge to resemble the transgender flag on March 31st, and urge our county leadership to consider doing the same. Jen said it's a cool idea and she's looking into it. Okay. So be it further resolved that we'll send this off to all the usual suspects at every level of government higher than us. And I motion that we adopt it.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alex.
Thank you, yeah.
Important stuff.
So what are we thinking at the lighting it up on the 31st? And Jillian at the library is, on board to help us facilitate that in all the ways. So
Yeah, definitely the 31st is the day, and it's a Friday. But if we wanted to, get them up sooner and have the week, I don't see that being an issue at all.
That'd be
Okay.
nice.
yeah, great.
Yeah.
Did you see my note before, like 2 minutes before the meeting?
No.
I think because it's so clear to you, and you actually started by describing this, when I read the resolution, I had to read it a couple of times because it kind of felt like it was like our declaration of Trans Day and basic or Trans Rights Day. Whereas what we're doing is we're adding our voice in support of an existing initiative that many have been in support of and working on for a long time. I did Wikipedia, it said 2009.
Yeah, since 2009. Yeah, so I mean, should we just moved past it. Should we do any sort of friendly amendment, maybe in the second one about International Transgender Day of Visibility?
I just thought it was like, because you actually, when you first started talking about it, you were talking about Philadelphia and
Oh,
like,
yeah.
and you said it, but like, it's not actually in there. Because
Annually, worldwide.
and has
Ever
since 2009. Yeah.
2009. So I moved that, I do
Yeah.
the friendly amendment that I just added.
I was nice, thank you.
Thank you.
I knew you would, because I knew you were just like, this is the thing we're doing, and like
Like
it was so clear to you, but
thank you for catching that, because it's important that we, give credit where it's due.
yeah.
But this is our first time passing this. I
Yeah.
thought it was an annual thing because, I don't know, just that's who we are. But we hadn't done this day in the past, and I'm hoping it can be a tradition now, just like our annual Pride resolution and our annual Trans Day of Remembrance resolution. I think it's important.
I was contacted yesterday by a freshman writing an article for the SUNY Oracle about trans rights in New Paltz. So I'm very interested to see their article once it comes out.
Oh, that's awesome. I'm glad they're covering that.
The next item is so this is the item for the public hearing. So then we should have closed the public hearing. This is just a discussion. Cool. All right, perfect. Right. So this is just what this is, for all intents and purposes, now a placeholder, because our plan is, once we close the public hearing, to adopt the law. Okay, so it's just, again, a placeholder for our plan to approve a local law so that we could end up with a single hauler for trash and recyclables, just as we did for the last 5 years.
There are just a few small definitions added to it. That's
Okay. And did we make any changes to the law in terms of how enforcement works? Because that was,
it's within the definitions of the types of licenses.
okay. I'll have to look at that more carefully before we go ahead and adopt the law. Because I know, Go ahead.
Share any of those changes.
yes. Motion to, or I move that we accept the resolution for bills and claims.
Okay.
All in favor? Bill, do you want to provide a planning board liaison update?
Sure, I'll be brief. The Ulster County Planning Board did not meet since I gave our last report, but they'll be meeting the first Wednesday in April. And I was unable to attend last night's meeting for the planning board because I'm out of town.
Okay, and then we'll wait to hear from Sana. I don't think there has been a ZBA meeting, is that correct? Or was there a ZBA meeting?
No, it was rescheduled for this Tuesday, March 28th.
Okay. Do we have anything else this evening?
I think that's it.
No. Motion to adjourn? All in favor? Aye.
Right, thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Bill.